Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock and this is City of Heroes. We will be getting back to our Sentinel, but first, Michael J. Dark Realmer, I believe, asked me the question of what powers were around in the original game when it launched, and which ones I think were added. Now, I don't have a lot of memory of which things came in which patch, so I'm going to be trying. I didn't look this up. You can probably look it up on one of the wikis. I'm going to give you what I can remember of what I think was in the game to begin with. There's been a lot of power set proliferation across the different archetypes, and a bunch of archetypes have been added and stuff like Sentinels didn't exist. So I'm just going to talk about the archetypes that did exist. We're going to look into those archetypes, and I'll try to tell you which ones I think were the originals. Honestly, I don't remember what was added first. I think the arrows, like Trick Arrow and stuff, were original, but they added some of those to other sets pretty early on. But don't quote me on that. So from the start, first of all, the only thing that existed was Primal Earth. There was no Praetorian because that was added in a patch. These 5 origins were already there and they don't matter. So now let's take a look in the various different archetypes. Right, so the ones that existed at launch were Blaster, Controller, Defender, Scrapper, and Tanker. None of these other archetypes were there when the game launched. Within Blasters, I don't remember whether Archery was there. Assault Rifle was there. Beam Rifle was not. Dark Blast was not. Dual Pistols was not. I don't remember if Electrical Blast was there. I think it was. Yes, Electrical Blast was there because we had a guy who did it. I think he was a blaster. Energy Blast was there. Fire and Ice were there. Psychic was not. Radiation was. I don't remember if Radiation was there because Radiation was a Defender and Controller power set for the buffing and stuff. Seismic was not. Sonic was not. Storm was not, and Water was not. So the original set of powers, I wish I still had the rule book because it had them all in there, was maybe Archery. I don't remember. Somebody let me know. Assault Rifle, that's 2. Dark Blast, I don't remember if that was there. That was in Defender, but I don't remember if that was. This is Proliferation. I don't think so. I think they had Archery, maybe. Assault, Electric, Energy, Fire, Ice. That's 6. And that might have been it. Maybe Radiation. I'm not sure about Radiation and Dark because Radiation and Dark were there for Defenders. I don't remember if they were there for Blasters. In the secondaries, Blasters had devices. I think they had all these manipulation. They definitely had fire and ice manipulation. I don't remember. They had electricity. I don't remember if they had earth and energy yet. They did not have martial combat, I don't think. Ninja, absolutely not. Mental, not. Plants, no. Sonic, no. Tactical arrow, yes. I think so. I feel like there were some of these things that drove the players nuts because they could have tactical arrow as a secondary but not archery as a primary, and so you couldn't have them match, which really irritated people. So it was these things where like you could have fire manipulation but not fire blast or whatever. I think they had fire blast and ice blast, but I don't know if they had archery. I feel like they had tactical arrow but not archery, or maybe the archery defenders had tactical arrow but they couldn't shoot the arrow as their blast, so they had to use a gun or something. Like they didn't always match on both the primary and secondary. So a lot of these weren't there. Devices was the one everybody used. They didn't have these guys, I don't think. They had like electricity, fire, and ice, I'm pretty sure. Maybe energy. And they had tactical arrow, I think. That would have been it. If we go into the controllers, I'm less familiar with these guys than Scrappers and Brutes and stuff. They had, I don't know if they had darkness control. They had earth control for sure. They had fire and gravity control for sure. Ice control, illusion for sure. I think they had mind. I know there were mind, like empathy and mind. I don't know if they had mind. Plant came later. I don't know how pyrotechnic is different from fire, but fire was there, not pyrotechnic. Symphony was not there. So that's what they started with. Secondary powers. Um, Empathy, yes. Force fields, yes. Kinetics, yes. All these affinities they didn't have. They didn't have poison. Radiation, I think. Storm summoning, yes. Traps and trick arrow, I believe. So this is where you go to like trick arrow, but you don't have an archery control, right? That kind of thing drove people crazy. Um, then in defenders, they definitely had dark because my best friend did that. Um, I don't know about cold. They had dark. They had empathy, force field, kinetics. I think radiation. Definitely trick arrow and then possibly traps. And then in their secondaries, I don't think they had archery. Maybe they did. Assault. Maybe the defenders could do it, but the blasters couldn't. Like the defenders could do trick arrow archery, but the blasters couldn't do archery trick arrow. It was one of the two. Assault rifle, yes. Beam, no. Dark blast, yes. Dual pistols, no. Um, they had, I think, electric, energy, fire and ice, maybe radiation. None of these other ones. Then in scrappers, I can tell you what we had. I don't think we had battle axe. That was a tanker one. We had broadsword. We had claws. We had dark melee for sure. We did not have dual blades. We didn't have electrical. We didn't have energy. Um, that was tanker. We didn't have fire and ice. We didn't have katanas. Kinetic. Nope. We had martial. We had spines. We had katana, yes. Sorry, we had katana, yes. That was the other blade. So you could do broadswords or katanas. You could do claws. But the fiery, icy melee, no. We had martial arts, yes. We didn't have sonic, didn't have radiation, didn't have savage. Didn't have staff fighting, didn't have titan weapons, didn't have war mace was tankers only. Right, so some of these things were tankers only. In the secondary, no bio armor. I don't know if we had dark armor. I think we did. We did not have electrical. We did not have energy. Fire, ice, no. Invuln, yes. Ninjutsu, no. That came later. Sonic, no. Radiation, no. Regen, yes. No, no. Yes, no. Yeah, there were only 4 or 5. You could do super reflexes. You could do regen. You could do invuln. And I think dark. And that was it. They didn't have a lot of all this other stuff is new. All right, shield is new, radiation and sonic armor are new, willpower that all came later. Then for tankers, we had I don't think they had any of this. They had fiery aura armor, ice aura armor. They didn't have energy aura yet. Invuln. Didn't have regen. Stone. That was about it. Willpower, super reflex were not there. Willpower came later. Super reflex was a scrapper set. Shield didn't exist. I don't think they had. They didn't have sonic. I don't think they had radiation. They didn't have regen. That was a scrapper set. They definitely had fire, ice, and invuln. I don't think they had dark. They didn't have bio. They didn't have electric. That came later because electricity was added during, even after I think City of Villains or during City of Villains. Some of these were added in the COV. Secondaries, they had battle axe, fiery and icy melee, and stone, and super strength, and that's it. And war mace, and that was it. So you can see there weren't a lot of these, actually. Like, more than half of each of the powers was not available at all, and then a bunch of them weren't available on your AT, even though they existed in the game. So one of the things that the devs did was power set proliferation. If there was a primary in the scrapper set, they allowed it in the tanker set at reduced damage. If there was a secondary, a primary in the tanker set for defense, they allowed it in the scrapper set at a reduced effectiveness. But that came much later. I mean, like after City of Villains. right? So that's the original powers, and none of the stuff that existed in the villain ATs was there yet. I honestly don't know what powers were added first. Let me take a look at Scrappers, because I'll remember that better. Um, what was the first thing? I feel like dual blades came in very early, because I remember playing a character with dual blades. Um, I feel like in this list, before power set proliferation happened, where you got like War Mace from tankers and scrappers and stuff, I think dual melee came in before that. Dual blades and dual pistols. Those were fairly early. Um, Ninjutsu came in with City of Villains and some of this other stuff. I don't know if they put any powers in before COV. I don't think so. So I think what happened is there were a number of powers that came in with City of Villains. The pain stuff came in with masterminds and stuff, and then they proliferated it to the hero side and to the other archetypes. So I think there was a suite of new powers that came in with City of Villains. And then I feel like one of the very first powers they put in that was not with City of Villains or Heroes, like this came in on its own, was Electric. Because I remember when they did Electric and it made it possible to do Elec, I made up an Electric Brute as a villain. I never did anything with him, but I remember making him up and he had like red lightning and stuff. Um, so I think the electricity maybe came in after you could color your powers, because that wasn't original to the game either. So yeah, it was much more limited, right? A tiny subset. Each AT had just about enough powers to fit on one screen without doing a bunch of scrolling. So anyway, if you're interested in that history, you can keep asking me history questions. I'll be happy to go ahead and um, talk to you about them and answer any questions you have. Hopefully that answers it. I don't know how well it answered it. Um, you're going entirely on my memory of stuff that happened 22 years ago or so. So, take all of that with a grain of salt. But I'm pretty sure that most ATs only had about 6 or 7 power sets in each primary and secondary. And I know for a fact there were a bunch that did not match. So there were people who had fire on a primary and they couldn't do, like, fire/kinetics was because you couldn't do fire on that archetype, right? And what was empathy psi was because defenders didn't have psi, and empathy was as close as you could get, right? And there were no psi anybody else. I think psi was only defender secondary, right? And as I said, there was at least one AT that could not combine trick, arrow, and archery that could have, but they just didn't allow it in the archetype, right? And so there was a bunch of that drove people nuts, that frustrated them, right? You could do invulnerability as a scrapper, but not super strength. You could only do invulnerability and super strength as a tanker, right? So that kind of thing, right? You could do like blasters had like fire and ice primaries, but not fire and ice secondaries. So you could be like a fire devices blaster, which was very popular to do. But why were they doing fire devices and not fire? Because there wasn't a fire secondary, right? Now there is. Because one of the things that the players asked for, that for some reason the developers, it didn't occur to them we would want, is to have our primary and secondary have the same special effect. Like, why wouldn't you? And for whatever reason, it didn't occur to them that was what we were going to want. Like, I don't know how you make up a super game and not hero game and not realize that the guy who's shooting fire blast also wants a fire shield. You know what I mean? And not like a device shield or whatever. It's fine that you don't have to do that. And I like that you don't have to do that. But for a lot of people, we want to combine them. This guy is storms and lightning bolts and electric armor. I don't want it to be storms and then fire armor because there's no electric armor for me to do. You know what I mean? It's okay to make that character if you want to be Stormfire, right? But if you want to be Electric Storm, you should be able to do that. And it's much better about that now. Okay, so we're trying to rescue Iron Hand. We know he's going to betray us, but that's okay. Now what I want to do, actually, what the main thing I was going to talk about today is I want to talk about, and we're 23rd level, so we got about half a level to go. I want to talk about the 7 deadly sins of character creation. So, in a couple of videos ago, I talked about this person named Adariad, who's got 3 videos that I would like to go over: the 7 deadly sins of character backgrounds, the 7 deadly sins of character creation, and then the 7 deadly sins of GMing. I haven't watched the GMing video, but I'm sure I'll have some things to say about that. I'm going to have less rantiness about the character creation because I basically agree with most of what he said, and I don't really have issues to take with it. But it's something that players could and should listen to because they sometimes make these mistakes. So he started off by saying, why are these mistakes? He said, because they lead to characters that are either not fun to play for you, or they're not fun for your group to experience when you're playing them, right? So either you end up not having fun with the character in the long run and wanting to change characters. It doesn't have longevity. It sounds like a cool concept, and then it doesn't actually work in practice. Or it may work for you, but it isn't working for your GM and the rest of your players, the rest of the players, right? So he said, first sin is the one-dimensional character, the character who is personality-wise essentially a one-trick pony, right? He's always suspicious of everyone all the time, 100%. Or he's always angry. Or he's a licentious bard who's always hitting on everyone, even the dragons and the owlbears, right? And werewolves and everything else, right? He's just hitting on everybody, and he's always in the mood, kind of thing, right? So he said this ends up mostly. Well, it can be boring for you to play, and it's going to annoy your fellow players. That you're always angry, or you're always mistrustful. Anytime you meet an NPC, we know this person in the group is not going to trust them, and we're going to have to argue him every time into cooperating with the NPC because he's going to say, I don't trust him. Right? And that kind of one-dimensionality is tiresome. Tiresome to the other players, and it may become tiresome to you. So you shouldn't create a character that has one and only really strong raison d'etre. Right? I talked about how my best friend made up this character who was looking for his girlfriend and his mother, but he didn't do that to the exclusion of every time. So there was this joke we made in Champions. The one player he wasn't a great role player. He hadn't played as much as we had, and he had a dependent NPC, his girlfriend, I guess. And the dependent NPC's name was Dina. And he knew that he was supposed to roleplay about her and everything, right? He had seen one of the other players lose experience points for not properly roleplaying concern for their dependent NPC and stuff like that. And so his way of roleplaying it was, so she got kidnapped, and they were fighting the bad guys who, I'm laughing just thinking about it. They were fighting the bad guys who had kidnapped her, and his way of role-playing it was each time his character went, he would have his character say, "Where's Dina?" and then attack. And so, like, we laughed about it because it's like he's fighting some thugs like this. Imagine this guy, right? Where's Dina? And then, boom, and you get knocked out. So they can't actually answer the question, right? He wasn't interested in the answer to the question. He assumed as a player, we'll find Dina by the end of the scenario, right? He was just having his character go, "Where's Dina?" Punch. "Where's Dina?" Kick, because he was a martial artist. And the joke was, the one guy said, "Yeah, this is like," he just laughed and said, "It's like, where's Dina?" Poof. "Where's Dina?" Poof. Right? you're not going to get the answer to the question, and it's just kind of silly. Um, Now that was just because he was trying not to get in trouble for ignoring the fact that his dependent NPC was at risk, and he was trying to get the roleplay credit without having to figure out how to do the roleplay properly, I guess. But imagine if he's a character who, in his backstory, it says, "My long-lost girlfriend is missing, and I haven't been able to find her." And the GM is going to eventually bring the girlfriend into the story. And in every single battle against every single villain, even villains who have no idea who the heck Dina is, he's going, "Where's Dina? Poof. Where's Dina? Poof." Right? It just becomes stupid. And so if my best friend, instead of having my characters just sort of motivated by wanting to find my girlfriend, was just like, in every tavern they went into, no matter what they were investigating, "Where's my girlfriend? Where's my girlfriend? Where's my girlfriend?" That could be annoying, right? And probably would have been annoying. And people would have said, "Enough already with the stupid questions about your dumb girlfriend. We're tired of you role-playing this." So, Idariad has a fix for each thing, and his fix for this is, I mean, you see, the obvious would be, don't just have a character who's ruled by one motivation. But his fix is actually more sophisticated and more subtle than that. What he argues is, when you create the character, give the character 3 traits that conflict with each other. So you might be mistrustful, and be specific. Instead of just being generally distrustful, say, I distrust a certain type of person. I distrust the city guards. I distrust the police. Let's say you're a supervillain in Champions and you distrust the police because they, I don't know, arrested you unjustly or something when a villain who had powers like yours was doing crimes, and they assumed it was you because you used lightning and the villain used lightning, right? And so you don't trust the police because they didn't do their due diligence, and you were stuck in jail for a while until they caught the real guy, and they didn't even apologize when they let you out, right? And so now your character's mistrustful of the police, but you could give him a conflicting characteristic where if someone has earned his trust, he's fiercely loyal and never turns on you, right? So now you have a character who has 2 potentially contradictory personality traits. And now imagine that a police officer saves his life and proves himself worthy. Now you have this guy whose instinct is to be mistrustful of the police, but is also fiercely loyal, and now when this cop gets into trouble, he's going to feel like he has to go and help him, right? And so this creates contradiction in ETU, the live play I watched on the Saving Throw channel, which is awesome. If you want to watch live plays, I highly recommend it. Megan Caves created a character named Adelaide Blackwood who was loyal and a big mouth, right? So now think about the contradictions, right? She might be loyal to somebody and therefore not want to betray their secret, but she's a big mouth, right? These are 2 hindrances she had, and maybe she can't help saying it, right? And so that conflict allows for really good and interesting role play, right? So give the character some traits that conflict with each other, and also self-contradictory traits. So you might have this person who's like super cynical, but they like reading like reading novels that are super hopeful and bright and, you know, like maybe adventurous, positive novels that, you know, they don't read the ones that are all like dystopian gloom, but they actually like reading these really cheerful, bright, and like humorous, happy types of novels, even though they're also a cynic. And so give yourself contradictions to work with, and that'll make the character interesting, but also not one note. And therefore you won't be constantly saying, "Where's Dina? Where's Dina? Where's Dina?" or whatever your version of that is. You've got some contradictory elements, and it makes it more interesting to play. It makes it so that the characters can't always guess what you're going to do in any given moment, and both you and the other people at the table will have more fun. The second one, and this relates to one of the sins of backstories, is he said, he didn't say it this way, but essentially your backstory is a campaign unto itself. That there is so much in your backstory that it's more interesting, involved, complicated, and has more stuff going on in it than your whole campaign is going to have. And as Luke Hart said, the most interesting things that happen to your character shouldn't be in your character's backstory, right? So, his solution obviously is don't do that. My solution is beyond that. Remember my rule, which is Luke Hart's rule of backstories. A backstory really should be a background, not backstory. That is, implies shorter. A backstory is the reason your character goes on adventures. Period. That's all you need in a backstory. If you stick to that rule, you won't have a backstory that's a campaign unto itself. You won't put stuff in your backstory that will then detract from the campaign. Right? You won't put anything in your backstory that would make it so that your character couldn't participate in this campaign. Since all you have in your backstory is why you want to be an adventurer, and as long as the campaign is an adventure, and you're an adventurer, you're good. So that would be my recommendation. Just make your backstory be the reason why your character goes on adventures. That's it. And please, no campaign length backstories to explain why you're not solving the problem if you write a backstory that's 6 pages long and concludes with therefore I became an adventurer. Okay? That's not right. Make it simple. My character grew up on the streets and was always poor, and he found out that you could, from somebody who was an old-timer who had gone on adventures and was pretty wealthy, that you could get rich by being an adventurer, and he wants to get rich, so he became an adventurer. That's all you need. But Scrapper, that's not really complicated. It doesn't have all these, like, the types of elements that you'd have in a novel or a movie. Good. It shouldn't. This isn't a novel and it's not a movie. You're playing a role-playing game, and all of the important stuff that happens should happen at the table during the campaign, not in your backstory. Right? Even novelists, when they write long, complicated, involved backstories, if they do, right, you only see the stuff they write about in the story. The rest of it is unspoken in the novel and may never come out. And the only stuff that matters is the stuff that actually comes out in the story. Anything that George Lucas wrote about the Skywalker family that didn't come out in episodes 1 through 6 is irrelevant, and nobody knows it, and nobody cares, because it's not in the movies. Right? And so, you should follow the same kind of rule. Don't overwrite your backstory. Just give your character a reason to always go on adventures. Not just this adventure, but make your character an adventurer. Right? Just as if your character has electricity and storm powers, and you have to put into your background, how did you get those powers? You also want to put into your background, why did you become a superhero? And make it short. Don't take too long, okay? I didn't write his backstory. If you can see some of my other backstories. Like, it should fit in the COH backstory space. It's, 1,024 characters or something. Like, if it's so long that the City of Heroes background can't take it, you wrote too long of a background, shorten it up. And make sure what you leave in there is the reason you go on adventures or you're a superhero or whatever. Third sin is social integration mistakes. The lone wolf. Basically, you make up a character who doesn't like working with other characters and likes doing everything alone. Okay, well, given that you're in a game where everybody works together, that's not a smart backstory. And I just over-aggroed, didn't I? Alright, I'll just come over here. I could die. I over-aggroed. I didn't see those guys on the other side of the wall there. Try to do an AoE to them and then go back to him. Make sure we're keeping this up. So what I want to do here is AoE them and just hit him. Okay, well, we took out some of these guys. Almost got him in one shot there. And there we go. Not too bad. So we couldn't rescue Iron Hand because Iron Hand is a traitor. So we had to capture him. What? I will say guys like this are less annoying with a ranged character than with a melee character. So yeah, you get it. You have to remember always, unless you're playing a game where it's just you and the DM, and then feel free to make up a lone wolf character. You are playing. This is a group activity. You are playing with a group. Do not make up a superhero that doesn't want to work with other people. Do not make up a superhero that wants to go it alone. Right? Because you aren't going it alone. There's going to be other people at the table. And nobody wants to sit there and watch you play your loner story while they don't get to play. And most of the challenges and other such things that the GM is going to set up are going to be for you. Oh, we leveled. That was really fast. Going to be for you and your partners to play together. The challenges aren't meant for you to do alone, and you shouldn't be trying to do that. So just don't make up a loner character. Make up somebody who likes to socialize and be with other people, because that's what your character's going to do, right? It's sort of like, I know that this campaign is about superheroes, and I'm going to make up somebody who's not a superhero. Don't do that. You know what the campaign's about, assuming you were told. If the game doesn't tell you, that's different. But you know what the campaign's about. Do the thing that makes sense. Okay, what do we have here? Not what I want. This lightning reflexes is auto. I like that. Gives me fly speed, resistance to debuffs, and run speed. Ooh, it's kind of like quickness. What I like about this is I don't probably have to put any slots on it, and we're slot poor right now, and it's not going to cost me any endurance. On the other hand, I'm so attracted to chain lightning. Also charge shield, that's a toggle. It gives me regeneration rates, which I'm going to need too. But I feel like, again, we're still slot poor. I'm going to go lightning reflexes here. It's an auto, I don't have to slot it. Right? It takes run speed and fly speed enhancement, so I don't have to slot this. It does mean, remember at one point I was saying I was considering putting a couple slots on fly to make it faster. I don't have to do that now. I can put a flight speed on this, and we'll be much faster at flying around. And we don't need any of that. I mean, technically I could put this in here. I guess I could put this in here and then just upgrade it when the time comes. Okay. Let's go to a shop and sell. As we go, we'll talk about the fourth sin, which is spotlight hogging. Making up a character. So spotlight hogging comes in two categories, right? This is character creation. So he's not talking about behavior when you hog the spotlight at the table, but making up a character who is essentially designed to hog the spotlight, right? A character who's always going to take center stage for some reason, right? Like the character who is the crown prince of the kingdom, and you're always going to be the one who talks to everybody and interacts with everybody and so on and so forth, because you're the crown prince and you can get them to do all these favors for you and stuff. And so as a consequence, you're always doing the talking for the party, right? Not because you rolled up a character who's got good persuasion, but just because there's stuff in your background that makes you the most important character. You make up a character who's the chosen one. My best friend did this, right? He made up a character who was this once-in-a-generation air genasi, daughter of the storm, scion of the god of thunder, Thor, right? And you're going to put this character into a party of mortals. and you're basically a child of God's. Right, that's kind of spotlight hogging. You're going to be the most important character in the story. I don't think he was trying to do that. I think realistically what was happening is he was a big fan of the character Storm. We both were, and I unconsciously he was putting her story into her backstory into his character. I still can't complete that. So let's see. What's this guy offering me? Uh, Probably have the idols under magical guard. You'll need a teammate. I can't do that. This guy, what's he offering me? The security chief. Well, it's family. We can take care of family pretty easily. So yeah, don't make up a character whose backstory implies that you're going to be the most important person of the party. Um, Always look for ways to involve the party and look for ways to create backstory elements that will involve the party. You're much better off creating a character whose backstory says he doesn't like to do things alone and he looks for help, because then you can ask the party for help, right? Um, so yeah, don't spotlight hog and don't design a character who's going to be bound to spotlight hog. The fifth one, this happens a lot, is morality mismatching. This is where you have a character whose morality doesn't match the overwhelming majority, maybe all the entire rest of the party, right? So you're playing in a superhero game where all of the other characters have a code against killing, and the ethic of the party is you're going to arrest, not murder people, right? And your character is a homicidal maniac who likes to kill and will kill given the chance. Kill first, ask questions later, that kind of stuff. You're in a group that wants to do a lot of thoughtfulness, and you just start combat all the time without thinking about it, without caring. Oh, there's a bunch of family. Okay, good. You're in a campaign that's all about the gods and worshiping the gods, and your character's an atheist, right? That morality mismatch makes it really hard for the GM and the other players, because your character is going to be doing things that aren't going to match with the rest of the party. You're the guy who always walks into every shop. I remember reading a story about this. The is he gone too? Okay. There was a rogue, a player of a rogue, who thought that rogues were just, I guess, blind murderers or something. I don't know. And he would go into the shops that the players wanted to shop from, and he would just murder the shopkeepers, right? And then take their stuff. The other players wanted to go in and buy stuff. They didn't want to murder people, right? So he was mismatched for what the group wanted to do. So make sure that you're aware of what the morality of the campaign will be, and make up a character that fits that morality, right? Pay attention to what the other players are doing, and if you recognize that this is a group of people who have a code against killing, then give your character at least reluctance to kill, if not also a code against killing. That's Champion's terms, but we could say that for any sort of a group, right? Whether it's D&D or what have you. Sixth one, mechanical misalignment. So there are two flavors of this that he talked about. One is the min-maxer, right? The person who makes up a character and is maxing out their character and doesn't care about theme or in-character stuff, right? This may be why the COH developers were so blindsided by the fact that people who could get, say, trick arrow, couldn't get archery, were mad that they didn't have both. Or people who could get fire, how to play fire devices and not fire. And the the designers might have said, well, but devices and min-maxers would have said, but devices is a better set, and you can get more efficiency for your character out of devices than another fire set, right? But that efficiency isn't necessarily what you're looking for. You might be looking for concept, right? And so what he argued is that you shouldn't design a character that is so focused on mechanics that it makes the concept not be a real concept that fits together. And we used to see this in Champions. We called it the bag of points method of character creation, right? You just put together a character who's a bag of points designed to be as efficient as possible, not designed to have any good concept, right? And as a GM, I would reject that. Why does your character have this stuff? The good Rob, as much as I loved him, right? I'll never forget, and I've talked about this before, the good Rob had a martial arts character who, because we wouldn't let him increase his existing powers and skills because he was already the most powerful character on the team, he saved up a bunch of XP and bought himself an ego whip, a whip that did ego attack, which is mental attack, right? And it did, I don't know if it did entangle or mental paralysis, maybe, which was a different power. Now that's just a subset of mind control that would never be allowed on a whip now, but back then it was a separate power, so he could either paralyze you or stun you. And he didn't do that because it made sense for his character to have a whip or do ego powers. He did it because he realized that his character could more easily do damage to an enemy who didn't have mental defense because it was rare. If the guy had high physical and energy defense, Assaulter would just switch to the whip and do damage, right? And if he needed to, if the guy had a high DCV, well, defensive combat value, so you're dodging a lot, that doesn't matter. An ego attack works against ego combat value. So not only don't they have the defense to reduce the damage, but they probably also won't have the dodging ability that they would have against a martial kick or a throwing star or something. And so it was his way of being able to min-max his character's damage. It wasn't for concept. Sky Raiders! We're on another story arc. Excellent. So we're going to Talos Island. The flip side of this is the person who makes a character and deliberately makes it ineffective, right? Like the guy who rolls up a wizard with a 9 intelligence in D&D, right? Wizards need intelligence to be effective, and your 9 is going to get you like +0, maybe even -1, depending on which version of the rules you're using, to all of your spellcasting. So I'm going to make up a wizard who's bad at wizardry and can't really succeed at spellcasting. And yeah, after a while that gets old. And it's frustrating to the other players because now we're losing battles. And some of us might die because your character keeps failing their skill checks because you didn't make them skilled in your expertise. So you're the character's magic user, or you're the character's tank, and you don't buy defenses, right? Imagine City of Heroes, and I'm making up the tanker, and I'm the team tank, and I only invest in secondaries, and I'm trying to do DPS. And so I keep getting hit and damaged in battle. Raider Engineer. I keep getting hit and damaged in battle. The defender has to keep trying to heal me and protect me because I can't protect myself, so the defender can't protect the rest of the team because they're trying to keep me alive because I don't have any defenses. I'm doing worse damage than the Scrapper, who already is the DPS person, and it's because I refuse to take the tanking abilities because my concept is that my tank is fragile, right? And so I don't actually have the character do the thing that it's supposed to be good at. And so he said, yeah, don't do that. Your mechanics of the character should match the concept. So if the character is good at something, fine, but don't pick mechanics just for the sake of mechanics. And don't make them bad on purpose, right, just to be a character. Like, it's interesting sometimes in literature. I remember reading a novel where It was the trilogy was called The Exploits of Ebenezer or something. There was this magic user. It was called, one of the books was called A Malady of Magic. It was a wizard who was allergic to magic. So every time he tried to cast a spell, he would start sneezing and stuff. And I remember, I feel like in the book, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. At one point, they tried a magic spell to cure his allergy, and he ended up like his nose hairs ended up growing so long that they were like the size of snakes. It was just like a whole mess. And I think this went on for the whole trilogy, and it was a big part of the story that this character was allergic to his own magics. And that, again, that works great in a novel, because in the novel you can arrange it so that there isn't a party wipe because of the allergy. But you can't do that in a role-playing game, right? Now there can be role play, but mechanically you should still be good, right? Like, okay, so he's allergic to it, but when he cast the spells, he was still, you know, good at spell casting. He just would then start sneezing, right? I remember, and I've always liked the idea of a character like this, and I might try to make one. There was the huckster in Deadlands in a show that I watched about Coffin Rock, and the huckster was like afraid of his own powers. So he never wanted to like deal with the devil because he was scared of it. He was afraid of the demon, and that the demon was going to take him over, and he was afraid of the dark magic and stuff. So he would sometimes avoid spellcasting unless he absolutely had no choice, and this made for an interesting character who was afraid of his own powers. I like that, right? But when he cast spells, he had high spellcasting ability, right? He didn't have a D4 in it. He was D8 in spellcasting. He was just a little scared of doing it, and it made some great role playing as the character had to come to grips with it, right? That is fine, but what you don't want to do is make a character who's actively bad at it, and then every time they try to do their thing, they fail. It's frustrating for you and frustrating for the other players. So, mechanical mismatches. And the solution to this is make up a character whose abilities and stats match the concept, right? Both good and bad. And then don't make up a concept where you're an incompetent, because that's frustrating for the other players. The last sin he talked about was an inflexible concept. This is where you have a character concept that is super inflexible, and you can't go with the role play. So you make up a character who simply cannot, under any circumstances, ever trust the Sky Raider. And then we have to do an adventure where we have to trust the Sky Raiders, and you're like, no, I'm not going on this adventure, right? So try not to make a character who's so inflexible that they won't go on adventures and they won't participate in the game with the rest of you, right? The rest of the characters. So I think that's a really good list, and I've seen a lot of these done in my day. Go ahead and leave comments if you've seen these sorts of things done yourself. And, you know, if you have a good story to tell, go ahead and do that. I always like to hear the stories you guys have, and we can talk about this stuff some more. Let me know if you don't think these are the deadly sins. Do you feel like some of these really aren't problematic, and it's not a big deal if somebody min-maxes out of character concept? Like, it's fine to min-max within a character concept. Like, my best friend mostly does that. But min-maxing in a way that's like sort of against a unified character conflict, making up stats that make no thematic sense but make a bunch of mechanical sense, right? It's perfectly fine to min-max if it's thematically appropriate and that's what you want to do and your GM doesn't mind. But you definitely don't want to end up with a character who makes no logical or thematic sense, because how do you roleplay that, right? Then it becomes hard to roleplay because the character doesn't match, the stats don't match the character. So all of these are issues. I've seen a lot of them in my day. Let me know what you guys think and whether you've seen this stuff yourself, whether you've done it yourself. I generally haven't done most of this stuff myself. I feel like the inflexible concept is more likely. None of the other stuff, but the inflexible concept sometimes will happen. For me, a great example, although you know this isn't a game master situation, and I wasn't with a party, but I've talked about this in the past too. My roleplay guild used to have a roleplay mission night on Sunday nights. I think it was. We would get together and roleplay our way through missions. So we're not just doing this mission, we're role playing it, right? We're having our characters make comments in character, and we're taking our time to go through the mission and enjoying the mission and enjoying the role play and everything else. So this wasn't just mission running. If it had been just mission running, I would have joined them. But this was explicitly role play night, and we were supposed to be role playing our way through these missions. And they were doing the Dark Astoria level 4950 content, and my character was going to join them, and the mission was to break a villain out of the ziggurat, the prison, and we were going to have to fight Blue Steel as one of the bosses in that part of the story arc. And I said, wait a minute, my character's a hero. She's not going to break people out of prison. That was me being inflexible, right? I didn't play the mission. I didn't join the roleplay that day. The compromise was after they broke the villain out of prison and got the information they needed from him, they then went on to the rest of the story arc, which was stopping another villain, and I was perfectly fine to join them. So I just joined them afterwards, and my character, I just said to them, don't tell my character you did this, and we're fine. Right? And they didn't say anything to her, and to be honest, we didn't do a lot of role-playing. For a role-play night, I was a little frustrated with that. I really felt like if they had just said, this isn't a role-play night, we're just going to do the mission to get the badge, I would have been like, fine, I'll join you, and it wouldn't have been a problem. The problem is that they tried to use it as role-play night, and I'm like, okay, if the one night a week when I'm actually role-playing my character, Silver Phoenix, who's a law-abiding citizen with a code against killing and all this other stuff, there's no way she's going to break this guy out of jail. Right? And when they said, well, it's the only way because we need the information from him in order to do X and stop Y from happening, my answer to that is, as a superhero, I want to find an alternative solution. Now, in a tabletop role-playing game, you can, and a GM would probably allow it. In a game like City of Heroes, you can't. Knowing what that mission is like, knowing that some characters wouldn't break a villain out of prison for any reason, it was a poor choice of mission for group roleplay night. And literally the only reason they chose it is because they all wanted the badge. Like, look, if you're badge hunting, that's not role-playing. Let's just badge hunt. It's fine. I don't need to role-play my character every minute. As you can see, I'm not role-playing this guy right now. I'm just going through the mission and talking to you guys. But if we're going to get together to purposely do role-play missions, then I'm going to role-play my character. And yeah, I made up a character who was inflexibly a hero and wasn't willing to do semi-villainous things just to and let the end justify the means, right? My character is not someone who will just do that. Character is not someone who will just do whatever it takes. I don't know if this guy is, because I haven't role-played him at all, and I have no real sense of him as a character. He's more just a rant character that I can use to rant with you guys and do this sort of thing. But if I've done any of them, it's been the character with the inflexible concept, who's like inflexibly heroic or whatever, and won't consider compromising their ethics to get a job done. Now, a GM who knows your character is like that should not give you stories where you have to compromise your ethics in order to get the job done, although sometimes part of the story is, okay, what choice do you make? But yeah, if I've ever done any of them, it's only that one. And I try not to make up characters that are inflexible like that. It's just that, that was team roleplay night, and I had made up a character who I mostly solo with, right? So I didn't worry about the flexibility of her concept because she's mostly a soloing character who I only role played with like once a week, if that. And most of the role play we did wasn't missions, but rather was just role play on the beach and Talos Island, or role play in the base, or whatever, and wasn't mission-based role play. And in that case, it didn't matter that my character doesn't compromise her morals, because we're just role playing socially. So yeah, have you guys done any of these? Do you recognize yourself in any of these? Do you recognize your friends and fellow gamers in any of these? Have you seen this? Has it ruined your campaign too? Or not? Maybe some of these you feel like aren't so bad. Maybe are some worse than others. Oh, I missed the engineer. And there goes that thing, the little shield generator, and we rescued the one guy. So those are the 7 deadly sins of character creation. In an upcoming episode, I'm not going to guarantee it'll be the very next one, but in an upcoming episode we will work on the 7 deadly sins of GMing and flip it around. We've looked at things players shouldn't do. We'll look at what GMs shouldn't do. So one nice thing about the dots, the damage over time, is that when you execute a damage, if you just hit the Raider Engineer with a simple blast, then he might kneel. But if you hit him with this damage over time or something like that, then he might kneel down after the first hit, but the second hit's going to knock him out of it. Because damage knocks you out of a long duration execution, whatever they call it, like kind of like concentration power or what have you. Is this the boss? You're just a lieutenant, dude. And where are your bodyguards? Like, you gotta do better than that if you want to challenge a City of Heroes player character. So where's his entourage? I don't see an entourage. Oh, there's the entourage, the porter. Oh, and an engineer who I missed again. Oh, I stopped him in time. I did not think that I had. And I've been playing this game, the game X4. Now X4, you start out as essentially like a pilot, but you can eventually hire other pilots and have multiple ships and have them mining and doing all kinds of jobs for you, and then you can get a star base, build a star base, and so on. And it's very fun and complicated, and so it costs a lot of credits to do this. So you start out as a single guy, and you're going to have to make a lot of credits before you can do any of this other stuff. So I was joking around with this friend of mine. I said, I need 1 billion credits to do everything I want to do. I don't know if I do. I'm just making that up. But you need millions. And so I said, I'm going to need 1 billion credits to do whatever it is I want to do. And I said, I'm on my way. I made 8,000. The reason I made this joke is, if you look down, you can see the subscriber count. My channel has 500. We've just hit 500 recently, guys, by the way. So thanks. That's cool. I don't watch my subscriber count much at all, but I noticed it went over 500. So anyway, I guess 10,000 subscribers at that point, you can sort of monetize the channel. Like you're allowed to monetize it after you get 1,000, but I don't think it makes you any money until you have at least 10,000. Based on the number of people out of the subscribers who usually watch a video, I guess, you're basically just getting pennies up until that point. So a lot of YouTubers want to get to 10,000, and then of course they want to get to 100,000 because after that the monetization really kicks in. So I was joking about this with him because he watches a show that had 9,986 subscribers, some D&D show, and it only needed 14. And he's like, the guy's like, let's get to 10K, and I'm like, that's cool. And I remember once seeing a video, and I guess it showed up in my feed because I was watching videos about how to make YouTube videos a long time ago. And the title of the feed was the title of the video, I think it was like a live stream that had been recorded and posted, but it said the road to 10K subscribers. And I looked down and the guy had 171 subscribers. That's not the road to 10K. That's the road to like 200, right? So I talked to this friend of mine, and then I started playing X4, and we had talked about the road to 10K and everything. And so jokingly, you start with 5,000 credits, and I earned 3,000. And so I said to him, I've got 8,000 credits. I'm on the road to 1 billion. So then the next day I earned 5,000 credits. I got to 13. And he then went mathematically and said, well, you added like 5/8, right? Which is over 50%. 62%. So if you just add 62% a day, you'll have 1 billion credits in like 32 days or something. I can't remember the math, but about a month. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. He said, why not? Just keep adding 50% a day. Yeah, that isn't going to happen, right? Because it takes a certain amount of time to make each 1,000 of credits. So when you have no money, it's sort of like Ross Perot's analogy. Years ago when Bill Clinton was running, and he said, I doubled the net worth of Arkansas. And Ross Perot said, that's irrelevant. You could have a penny to your name and find another penny on the street, and you've doubled your net worth, but that doesn't mean you're rich, right? And the state was still not wealthy, even though it's easy to double something that's a small number, right? But to double something that's a big number is harder. So yeah, I'm at 167,000 credits or something now, even after buying a few things. And he was like, oh, now you're going to be at 1 billion in a week. No, I'm not. Because the speed at which I got that first like 100,000 is about as fast as you can make 100,000. You can't spend that amount of time and make 200,000 tomorrow. I mean, I could make it faster if I had a big crew that was running multiple ships trading all over the galaxy, but I don't have that yet. So I'll get 1 billion eventually maybe, but right now it's nowhere close. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.